Having known each other for 7 years and dated for 2, Elias and I were finally discussing marriage. But the day before our engagement, intimate photos of Elias with Patricia hit the trending topics. That night, I ended up at a hotel with his worst enemy. Chapter 1. Elias called, asking where I was. I shifted my sore body, obviously lying in a man's arms. My head felt heavy. This was the aftermath of a night of indulgence. Last night, I slept with Elias' sworn enemy. I don't care where you are. Come to the hotel now. Do you realize the guests have arrived and are waiting? Elias' voice continued over the phone. I could feel his anger through the phone. My gaze darkened. Elias, let's break up. There was a moment of silence on the other end. He must have been surprised. Speechless for a while, after a long pause, he spoke in a resigned tone. Clara, don't be ridiculous. It's not what you think with Patricia. My eyes stung a bit. Yet, a self-mocking smile appeared on my lips. Elias, do you think I'm a fool? Before Elias could say more, I hung up, blocking and deleting him. It was only afterwards that I noticed the man behind me had woken up. Do you need to take responsibility? I shook my head like a bobblehead doll. My eyes inadvertently fell on his chest. The vivid red marks were a clear testament to last night's madness. Regret it? He asked. I was taken aback. Again, I shook my head. James and I weren't exactly close. We had met just a few times, always because of Elias. Yet last night, after drinking, I called James very elusively. I didn't know why it had to be him, nor did I expect him to actually come. Chapter 2. I went to take a shower. James followed me in. Even though we had already seen each other naked, I was still not used to it. I crossed my arms over my chest, feeling James's scorching gaze. You weren't this shy last night, he said, seemingly amused. He pressed me against the wall with a swift movement. His hands roamed all over. I thought he wanted to do it again and tried to stop him. James's eyes were intense and full of warning. I'm just checking. I stiffened, not daring to move. It did hurt a bit. I gasped and asked him, Are you done? He withdrew his hand in front of me. My face instantly turned red. I buried my head in my chest, wishing I could disappear. James was silent for a moment. Then, from above, I heard his emotionless voice. It should be fine. I murmured a reply and asked him to leave. James laughed softly. He let go of me. Chapter 3. James had someone send over clean clothes. On the way back, neither of us spoke. When we reached the entrance of the apartment complex, a familiar car was parked there. As soon as I got out of the car, Elias rushed over. Clara, what are you doing? We had known each other for 7 years and dated for 2. I had been with Elias from student life to entering society, from obscurity to becoming a business elite. But it couldn't compete with Patricia's simple statement. I'm back. He went to see her performance, arranged a drone celebration for her, a 2-hour fireworks show along the riverbank in J City. It caused a sensation in the whole city. When she fell ill, he stayed by her side, not leaving her for a moment. In just 2 months, everything I had worked for over 7 years was destroyed, and that day was my birthday. My heart ached slightly. I tried to calm myself down. I told him, there's nothing left to say between us. Elias, we're breaking up. I don't agree. This was the second time I had seen Elias so angry. The first time was when Patricia left him and went abroad. His face darkened, and his voice was cold and harsh. You were the one who insisted on getting engaged, and now you want to break up. Clara, are you playing with me? I told you, Patricia and I are just friends. What nonsense are you thinking? All our friends and family are here today. Do you know how embarrassing this is for me? None of your relatives even came. You planned this, didn't you? I couldn't handle his accusations and lowered my head. This action only added fuel to the fire. Elias grabbed my wrist. I stumbled as he yanked me. I was pinned against the car door, the pain making me gasp. At that moment, James, who had been silent in the car, suddenly got out and stood in front of me. Chapter 4. Mr. Lou. It's not gentlemanly to be rough with a lady. The tone was casual, revealing no emotion. Elias's face changed suddenly. What are you doing here? James and Elias were business rivals. Their relationship was nothing short of intense animosity. I had seen Elias work through the night on proposals just to compete with James for a project. But one was a favored child of destiny, and the other a self-made man. No matter how hard Elias worked, often, he couldn't outdo James with just a few words. Of course, I'm here to take Clara home. James's voice was calm, but he emphasized my name. He stood tall, shielding me. I heard him laugh as he retorted. But what does that have to do with you? If I heard correctly, Clara already broke up with you. Elias paused, silent for a moment. Then he looked at me, in the glaring sunlight. His expression was fierce. He stared straight into my eyes. Clara, you tell me. My eyelid twitched. My heart ached inexplicably, even though he was the one who betrayed first. And now, he was questioning me? I think I made myself very clear. I bit my lip, my voice trembling slightly. Elias, we are over. Bang! His fist hit the wall with a dull thud. Elias laughed angrily, pointing at my nose. All right, Clara, you'd better remember your words. Don't come back to me later regretting it. I staggered a bit, watching him turn and leave, his back resolute. My heart ached a little, but not a single tear fell. Chapter 5. James still wanted to walk me into the apartment complex. I stopped him. Mr. Son, please stay. James looked at me without any particular expression. His slightly upturned almond eyes had a faint hint of red at the corners. Call me James if there's something. Mr. Son if there's nothing. You're quite heartless. I ignored his teasing, picked up my bag. James's expression remained calm, his smile faint. As I passed by him, I heard him call my name. He asked, "Are you sure you don't need to take responsibility?" I didn't expect him to bring it up again, and my steps halted. I turned to look at him. He was also looking at me. His gaze was bare, intensely aggressive. I inexplicably felt guilty and quickly looked away. I forced a smile. Mr. Son, don't joke. Without looking back, I rushed into the apartment complex, but my heart was in turmoil. It wasn't the first time James had said something like that to me. The last time was at a party. Patricia had suddenly appeared, captivating Elias. As the hostess of the party, I was left alone. At that moment, James appeared by my side. He took my hand and asked, "May I have this dance?" He led me to the dance floor, meeting Elias's warning gaze. Above me was James's low chuckle. He said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Your boyfriend seems angry. If he doesn't want you, I'll take responsibility." Chapter 6. I slept like the dead, woke up to dozens of missed calls on my phone, and messages from my best friend, Nancy. Elias and Patricia went public. Did you see the photos he posted? Are you really done with him? Have you made up your mind? If you ask me, you should have broken up ages ago. What's so great about a guy like Elias? I stared at my phone for a moment. Then the doorbell rang. You're alive. Huh? Not answering calls or texts. I thought you might have done something drastic, Nancy said as she pushed me into the bathroom. Soon after, she threw a dress in, leaning against the door. She cursed Elias's heartlessness while urging me to put on some makeup. Today, your sisters are taking you out to have some fun. Nancy and I grew up together. She witnessed the entire story of Elias and me. Elias is great, but in her eyes, he's nothing, Nancy always says. Still hung up on his first love but can't let go of your kindness. Elias is such a jerk. It's just you, blind as a bat, liking a guy like that. Nancy dragged me out. Soon, we arrived at a club. A row of young guys waited in the private room, calling out in unison, "Sister." Nancy pushed me to the center, pointing at them for me to choose. I randomly picked one and found a place to sit. Nancy invited more people, and the private room quickly became lively. I started to feel a headache and wanted to wash my face. Opening the door, I was startled by a figure walking in. James followed by a few others. He paused when he saw me, asked, "What are you doing here?" I smiled and said I was here to have fun. At this moment, the young guy followed me out. James's cold gaze swept over, and the guy immediately hid behind me. "Sister, I'll accompany you. He grabbed my hand. We walked past James and his group. James seemed to call my name. I didn't hear it clearly. Chapter 7. It was already late at night when I got home. Yawning, I stepped out of the elevator. Someone was leaning against the wall. I was startled. Seeing who it was, I couldn't help but frown. James had his arms crossed, head slightly bowed. His messy hair fell across his forehead, looking quiet and obedient. Nothing like his usual brash self. Why are you only getting back now? I paused, asking him what he wanted. As I opened the door, James pressed in close. He must have drunk a lot. His hot breath grazed my neck. I felt a bit flustered and tried to push him away. His dark eyes gradually focused, but he didn't let go. I was entangled with no way out. I turned to look at him. My forehead met his warm chest. James stroked my long hair, his voice gentle. I came to check if you had been abducted. James pushed his way inside. I couldn't resist. Eventually, he pinned me on the sofa. His gaze was like fire, hotter than that night. He kissed my cheek and said to me, "Be with me, Clara, be my girlfriend." My mind went blank, my heart racing. He held my face, constantly asking if it was okay. I guessed he must be drunk. That's the only reason he'd talk nonsense. At 3 in the morning, I picked up the water on the table and poured it on James's face. James came out of the bathroom still cursing. I felt guilty and didn't dare to talk back. I handed him a blanket. James refused to leave. He said he caught a cold from the water and needed me to take care of him. I ignored his outstretched hand, returned to my room, and nothing was said all night. When I woke up, it was already late afternoon. The living room was empty. Only the blanket on the sofa showed that James had indeed been here last night. My head still hurt a bit, so I rubbed my temples. I was about to get something to eat when the doorbell rang. Elias stood outside, looking pale. I didn't expect Elias to come, and I was a little surprised. "Clara, we need to talk." It was the first time Elias had ever called me that. I froze for a moment, then calmly said, "We have nothing to talk about. If we do, then congratulations on going public with Patricia." Elias's expression was momentarily stunned. Then he grabbed my hand, which was about to close the door. He hurriedly explained, "That was Patricia who posted using my phone. I already deleted it." I chuckled softly, a bit rueful, taking advantage of my affection. Elias had always been aloof and self-righteous. For 7 years, he never looked at me seriously. I even thought he would never explain anything to me in this lifetime. But what is he doing now? Elias's voice continued, "I know I did wrong. I've thought a lot these past few days. I'm used to having you around. Clara, can we start over?" I turned my face away, not speaking. Elias took a step forward and grabbed my shoulders. It hurt a bit, and I struggled. Just then, the elevator doors opened. Chapter 9. James was holding 2 bags. In just a few seconds, Elias's expression changed from shock to anger. He glared at James, gritting his teeth, and asked, "What are you doing here?" There was a moment of silence. James walked up to me. He handed me the bags and smiled slightly. "I was worried you might be hungry when you woke up, so I bought some food. Go freshen up." Everyone could hear the underlying meaning in his words. Elias's face changed dramatically. He asked, "Did you sleep together?" The air seemed to freeze instantly, and even breathing became audible. I instinctively took a step back. James smiled and asked back, "Which day are you referring to?" Elias looked at me in disbelief. I hurriedly averted my eyes. This action undoubtedly added fuel to the fire. Elias, furious, lunged at me. "Clara, have you no shame? How dare you betray me?" He grabbed my arm. The items in his hand fell to the floor with a thud. I scrambled back in panic. In the chaos, James pulled me behind him. Elias's voice continued. He pointed at my nose and yelled, "Clara, how desperate are you for a man? Why him of all people? You're doing this on purpose, aren't you? Clara, you make me sick." Chapter 10. James's punch was swift. Elias fell to the ground in a sorry state. James stepped on his chest, looking down at him. "Say one more word, and I'll make you disappear along with the Sun Corporation. Elias, having fought with James for many years, knew well of his methods. After a moment, everything calmed down. James carried me to the sofa and checked my leg. I awkwardly tried to pull his hand away as it moved upward. He insisted. Let me see if there's a burn. I had no choice but to let go and watch as he lifted my skirt. The soup was very hot. My lower leg was red. I took a sharp breath. It hurt a bit. James immediately frowned. Silently, he took the first aid kit and applied medicine to my leg. After a while, he suddenly grasped my hand tightly. If I'd known, I wouldn't have provoked him. I didn't think he'd lay a hand on you. His voice was muffled and regretful. I was stunned for a moment and shook my head. After all, this was originally between Elias and me. Bringing James into it, I should be the one feeling guilty. Chapter 11. James cleaned up the mess. I ordered takeout again. While eating, I tried to speak several times. Finally, under James's gaze, I swallowed my words. Your leg is injured. I'll stay to take care of you. I opened my mouth to refuse. He ignored me completely. After throwing the trash into the bin, he noticed my reluctant look. What? You don't want me to? I nodded. He leaned closer. His tall figure loomed over me. For some reason, I felt a bit guilty. Don't worry. I won't stay for free. For a moment, I was dazed. James kissed me. His movements were gentle, yet full of aggression. I was so shocked that I opened my eyes wide and instinctively retreated. In just a few seconds, my heart was pounding like thunder. Is my rent satisfactory? His voice lingered with obvious delight. I was dazed for a moment. Then I pushed him away. As I rushed into my room, my breathing was still erratic. I touched my lips. They seemed a bit sweet. Chapter 12. James moved into my place. Yet, it felt like he hadn't moved in. He was very busy, so he didn't come over much. But he made sure to order my meals 3 times a day and came by at night to sleep. Actually, my leg was fine. It was a minor burn, treated promptly. Nothing serious enough to need convalescence. But he used it as an excuse. I couldn't argue with him. Nancy brought news of Elias's engagement. I wasn't surprised, but I was still stunned for a moment. There was sadness, but more so a sense of closure. 7 years of youth seemed to conclude at that moment. A few days later, I went home. I told my parents about the breakup face to face. They already knew, so their reaction was calm. They even comforted me. I stayed at home for 2 days, and when I returned, I saw James looking aggrieved. You still remember to come back. He seemed to have already made my home his own. Not only had he moved in his luggage, but he had also set up a desk in the corner of the living room. I was a bit dissatisfied and asked him, "How long do you plan to stay at my place?" His smile faded, and his voice was aggrieved. Why are you trying to kick me out again? Who would have thought that the ruthless James in the business world was such a whiny person in private? I couldn't do anything about him, so I dropped the subject. He took advantage, hugging me from behind. He seemed to enjoy intimate gestures. His face rubbed against my ear, back and forth. His low voice dragged out the words, "Clara, give me a title." I was startled and became more alert. I quickly pushed him away. Titles like that can't be given just like that. Chapter 13. James was angry. He ignored me the whole night. He even left for work the next day without saying a word. I knew, but I pretended not to. After he left, I got ready to go out as well. Nancy invited me to go shopping. She wanted to buy a birthday gift for her new boyfriend. The young guy was someone she met at the club last time. He really caught Nancy's fancy. While checking out, someone called my name. I didn't expect it to be Patricia. From behind, I wasn't sure, but it's really you, Clara. Long time no see. Indeed, it had been a long time. It's been almost 5 years since she went abroad. I forced a smile as a greeting. I had nothing to say to her. You probably don't know yet? Elias proposed to me. Patricia deliberately raised her left hand, showing off the huge diamond ring. I paused for a moment, then calmly looked away. Patricia continued, Clara, you should understand the power of the perfect first love now, right? With Elias. You'll never beat me. She had a smile on her face, full of provocation. I heard you had to buy your own engagement ring. That's the difference between you and me. I should have been angry, but my heart was calm. Just as I was about to say something, Nancy exploded. The power of the perfect first love? Who gave you the courage? Patricia was a privileged girl. She probably never had someone yell at her like this. Nancy was known for her combativeness. She didn't hold back at all. You knew he was taken and still went after him? And you have the nerve to show off? Patricia's face turned red and then white. She raised her hand to hit Nancy, but Nancy wouldn't give her the chance. With a slap, the scene turned chaotic immediately. Chapter 14. The end result was that the mall security called the police, and we were taken to the police station. Nancy had a scratch on her face. I got my arm grabbed while trying to break up the fight. Patricia got the worst of it, with a black eye from Nancy's punch. When Elias arrived, the injuries had been documented, and statements had been taken. Both sides were at fault, so a simple reprimand was deemed sufficient. However, Patricia refused to let it go. She threw herself into Elias's arms and started crying. My injuries are the worst. Why should we reconcile? I don't agree. I want justice. Elias's presence undoubtedly boosted her confidence. After all, in J City, Elias was quite a prominent figure. The people at the police station exchanged looks. Nancy, infuriated, was ready to charge at her again. This time, I held her back. I looked at them coldly, about to speak when a familiar voice came from behind. What kind of justice do you want? I didn't expect James to come. I was stunned. In my surprise, I was pulled behind him. His sharp gaze swept over everyone as he repeated, "What kind of justice do you want?" Patricia immediately fell silent. She looked pitifully at Elias. At this moment, the officer in charge quickly stepped in to mediate. I tugged at James's sleeve. Don't make things worse. James didn't say anything else. He took my hand and led me out of the police station. Once in the car, Nancy was full of gossip, but she fell silent when faced with James's frosty expression. James dropped Nancy off at her home. He didn't say a word on the way back. I guessed he was still angry, so I took the initiative to speak. Thank you for coming. How did you know I was at the police station? Let me tell you, that Patricia is really arrogant. After my outburst, there was a dead silence. I got a bit annoyed too. What was with the attitude? If he was so reluctant, why did he come to help me? Chapter 15. The Cold War between us lasted until we got home. I went straight to my room. It wasn't long before James followed me in. Comfort me. His voice was aggrieved, yet his tone was firm. I hesitated for a moment, then I reached out my hand. At first, James was reluctant to lower his head. Seeing me holding out my hand without continuing for a long time, he became anxious. He grabbed my hand and placed it on his face, muttering, "Clara, you're just taking advantage of the fact that I like you." It was the first time he had said he liked me so bluntly. His dark eyes stared at me. My face felt a bit hot. I turned my head away. He pressed closer, his chin resting on my forehead. Why didn't you come to me when something happened? His voice was much gentler now. I realized that this was why he was angry. I had thought about it at the time, but he was so busy. It was a small matter. I could handle it. I didn't want to bother you. It's not a bother. James's arm was around my waist, and I realized that at some point, I had ended up in his embrace, in a very intimate position. Clara, don't push me away. In the past 7 years, I've had admirers, but none like him. Passionate, straightforward. My breath caught. I froze. After a long time, I nodded slightly. I understand. Chapter 16. A few days later, James went on a business trip to negotiate a big project. I heard that the Lou Corporation was also vying for this project. I didn't ask much about it. Elias came to see me, which I didn't expect. Before I could say anything, Elias got straight to the point. Clara, you must help me this time. I didn't know why I had any reason to help him. I ignored him. Elias grabbed my hand directly. You know James is competing with me for the project, right? Clara, If you just tell me where he went and who he met, I'll be willing to forgive you. I must have been blind before to not realize how shameless Elias could be. Forgive? I didn't do anything wrong. What do I need your forgiveness for? I shook off Elias's hand and turned to leave. Elias tried to block me again, but I quickly dodged. Seeing he had no other way, Elias could only shout, "Clara, do you know James is using you?" My thoughts blanked for a moment. It took me several seconds to process what he said. To be honest, I didn't quite get it, so I asked him, "So what?" Elias probably didn't expect such a reaction from me. He was silent for a moment. Then he quickly explained, "James started investigating you 2 years ago. You know, Clara, at that time we were competing for a project, and you were my girlfriend, so he approached you on purpose." I was a bit shocked and a bit confused. I did meet James for the first time over 2 years ago. At that time, I accompanied Elias to a banquet. James came up to greet me, but Elias pulled me away. He threw James's business card into the trash and said fiercely to me, "That James is no good. Stay away from him." Back then, I had just started dating Elias. I had been infatuated with him for 5 years, and I was head over heels in love. I nodded heavily at Elias, almost swearing an oath. Elias then rambled on. He said things like, "Don't think he really wants to be with you, Clara. I'm doing this for your good. I'm worried you'll be deceived. James is not as simple as he looks. Just consider it my fault before I'll break up with Patricia. Come back to me, Clara. Aren't you the one who loves me the most?" I couldn't help but laugh. Even if James approached me with another purpose, what makes you any better, Elias? You're just a clown. Don't bother me. Chapter 17. That night, James called. I had mixed feelings. Even though I acted nonchalant with Elias, I still felt a bit unsettled inside. James quickly sensed something was off. He asked, "Is something bothering you?" I was taken aback and responded with a question. "Why do you like me?" There was a brief silence on the other end. I couldn't see his expression over the phone, but his silence made me uneasy. After a few seconds, I quickly changed the topic. "By the way, when are you coming back?" He paused again, but this time he answered quickly, "In a few days." I responded with a simple okay, lowering my head. I didn't say anything more. 3 days later, James came back. He said he wanted to take me somewhere. I wasn't very enthusiastic and felt down the whole way, until the car stopped outside J City Mall. "Didn't you want to know when I started liking you?" Photos were rolling on the big screen outside J City Mall. Below the screen were rows of flowers. It was rush hour, and there were many people coming and going. James held my hand and led me to the center of the square. Someone behind us whispered, "Isn't that girl the one on the screen?" I stood there, stunned and a bit confused. James pulled out a large bouquet of roses from somewhere. He held them out to me. As fireworks went off behind us, James's voice rang out clearly above, "Clara, do you believe in love at first sight?" Chapter 18. My name was trending in J City for 3 days. Along with it was J City's son corporation, James. That night, he also gave me a sports car. Later, he told me he had learned it from watching videos. Many people, to show their love, drive a sports car around the city, and on that car, there was a light box spelling out my name. Elias sent a message. He used a new number. Besides his usual words, there was an important piece of information. James had secured the project. As a result, the Lu Corporation suffered significant losses. James really hadn't mentioned this to me. Since that night, he had been extremely busy. I hadn't seen him for several days. That evening, James called, saying he'd come over later. I replied and went to the kitchen. There were still some tomatoes I had bought a week ago in the fridge. I took out 2 and found some eggs. I had just finished making tomato and egg noodles when I heard the door open. "You can cook?" James sounded a bit surprised. I stuck my tongue out sheepishly. I learned a little. Of course. I couldn't tell him. Actually, there was a time when Elias was so busy with work that he developed stomach problems. I specifically bought a cookbook and followed videos to learn for quite some time. Chapter 19. James had to attend a video conference. After dinner, I was about to go back to my room, but James held on to me, insisting I stay with him. I could only sit nearby, scrolling through my phone. The meeting was about the implementation of the new project and the upcoming work reports. Halfway through, James suddenly looked at me. "Your hands are so cold. Is your period coming soon?" The video call went silent. I even heard someone gasp. My face immediately turned red, but James carried on as if nothing had happened. I was so angry I gritted my teeth. Was he doing this on purpose? But that night, my period did arrive as expected. The first day is usually very painful. Before bed, I took some painkillers. As I lay down, James joined me. I wanted to stop him, but his hand was already inside my pajamas. "Don't worry. I won't fight a bloody battle." His hand gently massaged my lower abdomen. The discomfort eased significantly. I gradually quieted down in his arms, listening to his steady breathing. Suddenly, I remembered Elias's message. Is this project really impactful on the Lu Corporation? Judging from Elias's special visit and message, it was clear this project was very important to Lu Corporation. So, I wasn't surprised when James nodded. Without this project to support them, Lu Corporation will have a tough time next year. Whether they can get through it will depend on their luck. Lu Corporation was Elias's hard work. It was also something I had accompanied him in building. If they really couldn't get through it, I would feel some regret too. Chapter 21. Elias must have hired a lot of internet trolls. This matter escalated quickly online. The trending topics continued for days, getting more intense. Some people even found my social media accounts and sent me crazy private messages. They sent all sorts of offensive things. This was my first experience with online harassment. I felt a bit stunned, but after the shock, I became more worried. There was no word from James. Could something have happened to him? When I received a call from the Sun family, I was debating whether to ask about James's situation. A deep voice on the other end politely said, "Miss Clara, our master wishes to see you." I didn't react at first, until he added, "I am the Sun family's butler." I quickly understood their intention. The matter had blown up so much that it had caught the attention of the Sun family patriarch. Before I went, I imagined what the Sun family would be like, but I was still startled when I saw the mansion. The butler waited outside and personally led me to the second floor. In the study, the Sun patriarch had a stern face, bearing a strong resemblance to James. I politely greeted, "Mr. Sunday." His sharp eyes scrutinized me for a while before he handed me a bank card. "There's $1 million in here. You should understand my meaning." The cliched drama scene made me pause for a moment. Then I curved my lips into a smile. I pushed the card back to him. "Mr. Sun, there's a misunderstanding. I don't need money." The Sun patriarch's gaze turned colder. "Miss Clara, don't be too greedy." I smiled again. "You're mistaken. I might not be very capable, but I did set up my own studio. With the booming live streaming industry these past 2 years, I've made some money." Just as the patriarch was about to say something, the roar of an engine sounded from downstairs. Soon, James burst in. "Dad, what are you doing? I already told you. This matter is targeted at Sun Corporation. It has nothing to do with Clara." After not seeing him for a few days, James seemed to have lost some weight. His complexion didn't look good either, but he still managed to squeeze out a smile when he looked at me. "How can it have nothing to do with her? If it weren't for her, how would Elias have any opportunity?" To be honest, the Sun patriarch was quite intimidating, especially when he slammed the table. I felt like my heart was going to jump out. "I'll handle this matter. You don't need to worry." James took my hand, ready to leave. The patriarch was furious. He grabbed a teacup from beside him and threw it. James didn't dodge. He took the hit squarely. Scalding tea and shards of the teacup scattered, and his forehead instantly turned red. "James!" I felt James tremble. His grip on my hand tightened. The patriarch stood up abruptly. Realizing something, he sat back down. The two of them stared each other down. After a long silence, the patriarch sighed. "Do as you wish." Chapter 22. On the way back, I applied some medicine to James's forehead. Seeing his swollen forehead, I couldn't hold back my tears. James, you're such an idiot. James probably didn't expect me to cry. He panicked immediately, clumsily. He grabbed some tissues. While wiping my tears, he kept saying, "Don't cry. I'm fine. It doesn't hurt at all." I didn't want to cry either, but I couldn't control my eyes. The tears fell like broken strings of pearls. Big drops kept falling. James got anxious. After comforting me to no avail, he simply pulled me into his arms. His embrace was warm, and his scent was familiar. He stroked the back of my head, softly comforting me. I don't know how long it took. I finally cried enough. Embarrassed, I peeked out from his arms. Only then did I realize that the driver had been glancing at us through the rearview mirror. My face immediately turned red. I hastily wiped my tears and sat up straight. I didn't dare to speak again until the car stopped. I felt a bit ashamed. After the driver left, I remembered something important. By the way, how are things at the company? I had thought about calling him these past few days, but I first received a message from James. He told me not to look at those things online. I obediently listened. Don't you trust me to handle things? It's not that I don't trust him. It's just been too quiet. After the incident, there was no movement from the Sun Corporation. It felt like the calm before the storm. So I asked, "Have you thought of a strategy?" I saw James smile slightly. He asked me in return, "Why did you break up with Elias?" I was momentarily stunned. I quickly understood. I'm the victim in this situation. Why should I let Elias twist the truth? Chapter 23. I wanted to step forward. James stopped me. He stroked my hair, his voice lazy. "I don't want you to get involved again. Sun Corporation will handle this." I didn't intend to destroy him completely. Elias brought this on himself, so he can't blame me. The news of Lu Corporation's downfall came quickly. At the same time, photos of Elias and Patricia once again hit the trending topics. Public opinion swiftly changed direction. Overnight, the victim turned into the perpetrator. Patricia came to find me. She told me Elias had been taken away. I had already heard from James that it seemed to involve an economic case and he needed to cooperate with the investigation. This was the first formal meeting between Patricia and me since she returned. Compared to my memories, she hadn't changed much. In fact, she looked even better than in school. However, her arrogance had grown even more pronounced. "This time, you won. But Clara, don't get too complacent. The Sun family's door isn't easy to enter. You're not quite there yet." I had known Patricia even longer than Elias. She liked to compete with me since we were kids. She loved to take what was mine. I once heard her say, "I don't like Elias, but Clara does. Whatever she likes, I will take away." So she agreed to Elias's confession, and came back years later to steal again. What was her mindset? I didn't know, nor did I want to know. Chapter 24. James wanted to officially introduce me to his family. I was extremely nervous. After seeing how angry the Sun patriarch was that day, I wondered if I might get hit again if I went with James. I didn't dare voice this thought, but right before leaving, I had second thoughts. Maybe another day? James was amused by my reaction. He ruffled my hair, dragging me to the car. He said, "Even an ugly bride isn't afraid to meet her in-laws. What are you afraid of when you're so beautiful?" He tried to cheer me up, but I couldn't bring myself to smile. Patricia was right about one thing. Families like theirs aren't easy to enter. The Sun family had quite a few members. After being introduced to a circle of relatives by James, I was completely overwhelmed. I thought it was just your parents. Not this many people. James smiled at me. He didn't tell me that all these people were called by the Sun patriarch. During dinner, James kept serving me food. With everyone watching, my head started to ache. When he put something else in my bowl, I whispered, "I can do it myself. You don't need to worry about me." James just kept smiling, looking like a happy-go-lucky son of a wealthy family. After dinner, James was called to the study. I was surrounded by a group of people. One of his aunts, maybe the second or third, held my hand and said with a smile, "This is the first time James has brought a girlfriend home. My brother insisted we come and have a look. Such a beautiful girl." What could he possibly criticize? Others chimed in. No wonder he refused all the girls we introduced to him before. He already had someone he liked. If only he had brought you home sooner. I had never experienced anything like this before and awkwardly smiled along. Luckily, James came out of the study soon, holding a box. Take a look. A smooth, transparent bracelet appeared in front of me. Someone said, "That's a family heirloom. Looks like the patriarch has approved." James handed it to me. I hesitated but reached out. As the bracelet slid onto my wrist, James hugged me tightly.